Hello, I'm Isabelle McCarron and I'm doing my dog health check video. As you can see, I don't have the real dog with me. I wasn't able to get one for this video, but hopefully I'll have them for the other ones. But we're going to be using this pretend dog instead. So the first thing you do in a health video, health check for a dog, is you would check the respiratory rate and the pulse. We want to do those things first, so the dog isn't kind of stressed out and heart rate hasn't rise, because we've been handling it lots, that we want that to be the first thing that we do. So how we check respiratory rate is, while the dog is still relaxed, we can watch its chest moving up and down, and we can put a 30-second timer, and we count how many breaths we see, and we times that by 2. And the number you want to get, we want it to fall between the 10 to 30 breaths per minute, because that's the ideal respiratory rate for a dog. And then we want to check the pulse. So the way we check the pulse in dog, the best place is actually the inner back leg of the dog. So we check the pulse, we do the same thing, 30 seconds, we hold, we count the pulses that we feel, and we times it by 2, and we want the answer to fall around 60 to 180. That's the ideal range for a dog's pulse. So then we would check the body condition of the dog using the body condition score, which is a score that goes from 1 to 9. 1 being very thin, ribs easily seen, easily felt, with like hardly any fat on the dog, to up to 9, which would be obese, where you can't see the ribs, really hard to feel them because there's a very thick layer of fat on the dog. We're looking for 5 on that score for the ideal body weight, which you can't really see the ribs by just looking, but you can easily feel them because there is a thin layer of fat on the dog. Then we want to check the sex of the dog. Basically, we're doing that is just checking the genitals of the dog. So the dog, if it has a penis, it will be male, and it will be located on the lower abdomen. And if the female dog has a vagina, it'll be female, which is located below the anus. Next, we will check the age of the dog. It is quite hard to determine like the exact age. You'll never know the exact birth date or anything like that of a dog, but we can kind of group it into 3 groups. So juvenile, adult, and aged. Some ways that we can kind of figure out what group they're in would be looking at their coat and their teeth. So for juvenile, we'd be looking at stuff for the coat. Their coat would be really, really fluffy, and their teeth would be very clean, obviously new, clean, would have like no decay, no breakage, no discolouring or anything like that. For an adult, their coat wouldn't be fluffy anymore, it would be coarse now because they're an adult, and their teeth will have some discoloration, definitely some wear to them, maybe some breakage depending on the dog. And then an adult dog would also, an aged dog would also still have a coarse coat, but they would also probably have grey in their hair, and their teeth would usually be very damaged by this point. They probably have some teeth that are lost, lots of discolouring and decay, and even some breakage is very likely. And that's how we can tell them apart. Then we look at the mouth of the dog. So when we're looking in the mouth, I can't do this on my puppet, but we have to make sure the mouth is as much open as possible so we can see as much as we need to. The stuff we're checking for in the dog would be ulcers on like tongues, the gums, checking if the gums have discoloration, checking the teeth, the things that I said before, like any damage like cracks on the teeth, any like built up of decay, and also checking for like really, really bad breath, like more than normal dogs. And we also, while we're in the mouth, because we kind of want to do everything in different areas, we kind of want to do them all together, so we're as less handling of the dog as possible. We always want to have the minimum amount of handling as possible. We're also going to check their capillary reflexes. So how we do that is we would lift the top lip of the dog, and we could use our thumb or our finger, and we press onto the dog's gums. What we want to see is when we take the gum off, we'll be looking very closely, when we take the gum off the dog, we want to see the colour return back to its normal colour of its gums in 2 seconds. If it does do that, it has a good capillary reflex, and if it doesn't have a very good capillary reflex, so that's something we need to check. We also need to check the skin and the coat of the dog. So some stuff we'll check for the coat would be stuff like any matting. If a dog has lots and lots of matting, that's quite easy to see, but if it may be a really big fluffy dog and there might be flatting matting underneath layers of fur, so you'll need to make sure you check all the layers of the fur to make sure there isn't any matting anywhere. You also need to check for alopecia or hair loss in the dog, which is quite easy to see just by moving the hair around and having a look. And you need to check for any dandruff in the dog. For the skin, you need to check for if the dog is dehydrated or not. It's really important. And we do a thing called tenting, which is where you kind of you pinch the back of its neck, kind of get the skin, and you kind of pull it up a bit, not to hurt it, but just to see. And when you let go, you want to see the skin, bounce right back to where it was. But if it goes back quite slowly, that means that it is dehydrated. So we don't want to see that. We want it to bounce right back into place so we know that it is hydrated. We also want to look for any fleas on the dog, fleas or flea dirt. A place that fleas like to group and hang out on a dog is actually on its bottom just before its tail. So we need to move the fur of the dog with our fingers like this and check. We can check other areas, but this is a prominent area that it is, so make sure you have a really, really good check around this area by moving the fur with your hands like this. We also want to check for any skin discoloration. We also use this technique. We'll have to look around the dog in different areas as well, because that could be, this might be okay discoloration, that's fine. But then this skin over here doesn't look very good. So we need to check around the dog quite a lot. We're checking for any irritation, any redness and discoloration on the dog's skin. We also want to be checking any lumps or bumps or any wounds on the dog. And we just do that by doing top to bottom, by running our hands down the dog, checking all its body, and making sure we don't feel any of that. Obviously, if we feel any of that stuff, especially wounds, we can actually help with that, help treat it. And also it's good because if we had to groom the dog right after the health check, we know where to avoid spots, so we don't hurt it while we're grooming it. Then we're going to check its eyes and its ears. So basically for eyes and ears, there's a couple of the things that are the same. So for eyes and ears, we want to check for discharge for both, and we also want to check if there's anything inside the eye or inside the ear that shouldn't be there, and if there's any cuts or wounds that are close to the eyes and the ears that could be hurting the animal. For the eyes, we also want to check if there's symmetry in the eyes, because if there's not symmetry in the eyes, it could actually hurt their walking and other abilities like that, so we need to check that. For the ears, we need to check things like if there's any mites in the ears, and there also is there any built up wax in the ears. One way we can actually tell that there's mites in the ears is it puts off a bad smell. So if the ears smell bad, it could mean that there's mites in the ears or it has an ear infection. And another way we can tell of an ear infection is if the dog's head is tilted a bit. That's actually a really good sign of an ear infection. Then the last thing we'll do is we check the temperature of the dog. So the normal temperature of the dog that we want to see is 38.3 to 38.7 degrees Celsius in the dog. So when you take your dog's temperature, you really want to see it around that range.